the meeting started, we're good to go.
All right, well, very good. Well, then let's go ahead and get it started. I think, let's see what time we have. We have 4:03, so perfect. All right, with that, we will call to order the September, there we go. All right, we will call to order the September 17th, 2020 Delta Protection Commission Zoom meeting. And to begin, I believe staff has figured out how to get us a flag on the screen. There we go. All right. So Skip, would you lead us in the pledge of those of you that are able to stand and join us in saluting the flag?
I will. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of
of
the
the
United
United
States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one
one
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty
and justice for all.
all.
Right. Very good. Thank you, Skip, for that. All right. So as a reminder, you know, these calls are a little tricky, so we're going to remind all commission members to keep their phones or their computers on mute unless they're talking. And then when they are going to chime in, please identify yourself so that our newest clerk knows who's talking, and they'll be doing some roll call votes, obviously. And then we also remind the public to do the same thing, right? So we want to make sure that everybody keeps their phones on mute so it's easy to hear everybody else when they're talking. So
how do I mute it?
I'm sorry?
How do I mute it? It's Ellen Nakanishi.
Ellen, let's see. Are you calling in on the phone or what are you using?
Phone, on the phone. I'm on the phone.
Right. So is that a *6, Eric? I can't recall on a phone.
We're sorry. Your conference is ending now. Please hang up.
That's not good.
I think it's a different one. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
For anyone on the phone, you need to push in sequence a # and a number 2. That will raise your hand, and if you want to unmute, it is *6.
Commissioner, does that seem to be working for you? All right, well, for the time being, we'll assume that it does unless Commissioner Nakanishi lets us know differently. We'll go ahead and proceed. So with that, let's go ahead and establish a quorum. So we'll need a roll call to begin the meeting with our new commission clerk, Sis Hendricks. Welcome, first of all. If you'll help us establish the quorum, that'd be wonderful.
You got it. Thank you. Chair Villegas.
Present.
Vice Chair Natoli. Repeating, Vice Chair Natoli.
This is Supervisor Burgess. I was just kicked off a moment ago, so many of us might have been kicked off.
Ellen Nakanishi, am I on?
Yes, we can hear both of you.
Thank you.
Shall I wait?
No, please proceed, Sis, but I do note that Supervisor Vice Chair Natoli, his chair is empty, so I think he just hasn't come in front of his computer screen yet. Maybe you can circle around to him at the end.
You got it. Commissioner Wynn.
Here.
Commissioner Burgess.
Here.
Commissioner Thompson.
Here.
Commissioner Krieg.
Here.
Commissioner Nakanishi.
Here.
Commissioner Paroli. Repeating, Commissioner Paroli. I know he was here. Should I come back around?
Supervisor Natoli's here.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner Slater.
Here.
Commissioner Agar.
Here.
Commissioner Vogel.
Here.
Commissioner Bush.
Here.
Coming back around to Vice Chair Natoli.
Here.
Ex officio Commissioner Senator Galgiani. Repeating ex officio, Commissioner Senator Galgiani. Ex officio Commissioner Assemblymember Frazier.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum with 11 commissioners present. Pardon me, 12 commissioners present.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much. And first of all, and welcome to you, new commission clerk, Sis Hendricks. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for your work this evening. All right, so with that, we have a quorum. So before we get started with the formal agenda, I just want to please join me in welcoming the newest commission member, Dennis Agar, from the California State Transportation Agency, Secretary Kim's position, and interim district director for Caltrans Region 10. Am I correct? Am I pronouncing that correctly, Dennis?
That is correct. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely. And so welcome, first of all. And did you want to share a few words, or if the floor is yours?
Sure.
Yeah. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the welcome. It is my pleasure to serve as part of this commission and representative of our agency secretary, David Kim. I'm glad to have this opportunity here in District 10. And just to give everyone a little bit of quick background of myself, I just finally sent my bio over to Erik. Apologize for the late delay on that. However, I'm coming in, even as an interim, I'm hoping to come back as a permanent District 10 director for Caltrans, so I can serve in this commission for years to come. My background with Caltrans has been over 30 years serving Caltrans. As a matter of fact, prior to me coming down here, I was in our headquarters office as the division chief for the maintenance program statewide. Prior to that, for those who probably know my background already, I was the District 10 director for about 5 years previously. So I'd like to come back on my second term here in the district and serve this district and everyone that I work with here, including this commission. I'm not going to take any further time from that, so thank you very much, Chair, for this opportunity.
Well, wonderful. And thank you very much for joining us. And I apologize, a little bit of noise there in the background there at the very end. So reminding everybody to mute your phones if you're not speaking. So welcome, Dennis, and looking forward to having you. All right. So I believe, and I didn't want to flip over and lose the screen here. I think we're having technical difficulty, but I believe Commissioner Bouldin was not able to join at the last minute, but I do think Commissioner Sandine has joined from West Sacramento. Is that correct?
No, she has not. She won't be able to join us, Mr. Chair.
Oh, she will not. Okay, very good. I wasn't able to read the entire message, so very good. All right. So are there any other comments or questions regarding Dennis's appointment? So if not, then that takes us to our next item, which is public comment. And let's see. So I think, Natasha, you're monitoring the screen for any public comments. Are there any hands raised at the moment?
There are no hand raised.
All right, so no hands raised for public comment. At this juncture, that takes us to the next item 4 is the chair's report on the Delta Stewardship Council activities. I can do that pretty quickly.
I'm sorry. I do have a comment that Barbara Daly would like to speak.
Okay, welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Commissioner Villegas?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'd just like to ask, since I am part of the Delta Protection Commission's Advisory Committee, we've been talking about the Delta transportation issues and have asked that they be on all of the agendas, and I don't see them on this agenda or that item on this agenda. I was wondering if it would be appropriate to talk about that now. Erik Vink had mentioned he was going to call a transportation summit this fall, and I was just wondering if there's been any movement on that, any progress.
Yeah,
and also, has Mr. Commissioner Agar been briefed on our transportation issues? Would be my question.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for that, Barbara, and we'll have Erik address those questions. Is that all you had this evening?
Yes, for now.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you so much.
We're not
Eric?
going to talk about those, or?
No, we are.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I just wanted to confirm those were your comments before I
Yes.
asked Eric to address them. Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Eric, did you want to address her questions?
Yeah, I will provide a brief update in my executive director report. I don't have a freestanding item on Delta transportation challenges because there's not a whole lot to report, but I am working with Assemblyman Frazier's staff. I'm hoping that we'll be able to find a date that would work for him and then make sure that works for integral commission members as well, so we can get the word out about conducting that. But in the meantime, I'm just trying to work more with the Caltrans contacts. I appreciated an opportunity to visit actually in person, which was a rare treat, with Commissioner Agar just a couple of days ago, and next reaching out to Caltrans District 3, which is out of Marysville. So I'll report a little bit more about that in my ED report, but I have shared with Commissioner Agar the Delta Transportation Challenges recommendation that the Commission approved at its April meeting, and that was based on a recommendation developed by the Delta Protection Advisory Committee.
Yep, very good. Yeah, thank you for that, Eric. And I think at the last meeting, or if not the one prior, we discussed rather than having it be a standing agenda item per se, it would be part of your executive director's update, so that there would be a spot identified on a regular basis for the commissioners to know if there were any changes. So thank you. Okay, so Natasha, assuming there are no other hands raised under the public comment portion.
Correct.
Okay, very good. So then that takes us to item 4, which is the chair's report on the Delta Stewardship Council activity. So I can do that pretty quickly. There wasn't a whole lot. It was a pretty brief agenda, but there were a few things I wanted to share with the commissioners. Number one, there was an action item of approval of the federal cooperative agreement with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation for up to about $3.5 million to add funds to the research awards for the 2020 Delta Science Research Proposal solicitations. So, so obviously that's good news that we've got additional funds for the research science work that we're doing, and we adopted that unanimously. And then we had a presentation by the State Water Resources Control Board staff and the department, let's see, I think it was, yeah, State Water Resources Control Board staff on actions taken relative to some recent legislation on water use efficiency standards and the reporting requirements for agricultural use. That's legislation that was passed recently, and so state agencies are getting going on the framework for how they're going to implement that legislation, and that's obviously part of a broader goal of reduced reliance on Delta water supplies. So good presentation there. And then I think it's almost a standing item for the Delta Stewardship Council. We received an update on the Delta Conveyance project and the status there. And that was done by Department of Water Resources and the Delta Conveyance Design Construction Authority. And then more recently, we were notified that Chair Tatayan will be recusing herself from any further participation in any regulatory or potential adjudicatory roles relative to the Delta Stewardship Council, in large part because her husband works for a firm that has been retained by the Department of Water Resources to advise on the project. So that information came subsequent to the meeting, but that's the status as it relates to the chair's role on Delta Conveyance. So that is my update. Are there any questions or comments regarding any of that?
There are no comments in the chat, and I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, very good. So that takes care of that item. Erik, was there anything else I needed to add on there? I think we had talked, but those were the 3, right?
That's correct. Nothing else, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you for that. Item 5 is commission comments or announcements. That's for the opportunity for our members of the commission to share any comments or announcements that they feel pertinent. Are there any hands raised at this point?
No.
All right, moving right along, seeing none. Item 6 is the consent agenda. The only thing we have on consent is the adoption of the minutes required for the July 16th meeting. Everybody's had a chance to take a look at those minutes, I'm assuming, and unless there are any questions, we're looking for a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Who was that?
Director Natoli, Commissioner Natoli.
Totally, all right. And we're looking for a second.
Second by Thompson.
All right, thank you very much. So we have a motion and a second, and so I would ask the clerk to take a roll call vote on that.
Chair Villegas,
Yes?
Chair Natoli, Vice Chair Natoli,
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Krieg,
Yes.
Commissioner Nakanishi,
Yes.
Commissioner Paroli,
Yes.
Commissioner Slater,
I'll abstain. I was not there.
thank you. Commissioner Agar,
I'll abstain since I was not there either. Thank you.
got it. Commissioner Vogel,
I'll abstain as I missed the meeting.
and Commissioner Bush,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we have a vote of 9 yes with 3 abstaining.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that motion carries. So thank you very much for that. Taking us to item 7 is Executive Director's Report. Erik, it's all you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission members. Good to see everyone. I want to spend a little more time on my report because there's quite a bit of detail to offer up on Delta conveyance. And again, this is DWR's proposed single tunnel project. As I mentioned to Commission members at the last meeting, the scoping for the environmental impact report had concluded a few months ago, and on July 10th, DWR released a scoping summary report. Subsequent to that, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers announced that they will be taking the lead on preparation of an environmental impact statement under the National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA. Scoping comments to the Corps of Engineers are due October 20th. The Commission does plan to submit scoping comments to the Corps that probably will look very similar to the comments we prepared for the EIR. Both the draft environmental impact report and the draft environmental impact statement, 2 separate documents, are expected to be out in early 2022. And that's significant because when I last reported on this, the intended timeline was the first quarter approximately of 2021. And now that schedule has slipped by a full year. So coordinating the 2 environmental documents has led to that, as we're told, has led to that delay in the release of the drafts. We continue to meet, and by we, I mean myself and Commission Program Manager Virginia Gardner. We continue to meet with the Design Conveyance Office staff members at DWR. We had a meeting in August. We'll meet again on October 5th. Our current focus is on recreation and on, in particular, discussions with them about their obligations under the Davis-Dulwig Act, which basically is the State Water Project recreation commitments. When there are features of the State Water Project that are built or improved, there's corresponding recreation commitments. So we'll continue those discussions with the DWR staff. In the meantime, the Design and Construction Authority, which is the joint powers agency comprised of the water contractors, continues to meet monthly. They had a meeting again today. And the Stakeholder Engagement Committee, which advises the Design and Construction Authority, and which is comprised of Delta residents and Delta interests, people representing different Delta interests. They continue to meet on a monthly basis. Their next meeting is next Wednesday, September 23rd, and that's their standing meeting date, the fourth Wednesday of the month. A highlight from the most recent meetings of both is that last month there was a preliminary cost estimate of the single tunnel project, and the estimate was approximately $16 billion, which is very similar to what the twin tunnel project was estimated to cost. Granted, for the twin tunnel projects, there was very little design and engineering, and there's much greater design and engineering for this single tunnel proposal that's currently being proposed. Of note in that budget totaling 16 billion is that only 2.5% of that amount was proposed for mitigation. That stuck out to me. I don't know how mitigation is defined in these early cost estimates, but I would hope and believe that when this project finally, if it should finally move to construction, that there would be more than that amount set aside, both for mitigating effects to the region, but also for undertaking commitments to ensure that the Delta is protected and enhanced even as this project proceeds, which of course state law requires. So more to come on that. The governor's water resilience portfolio, which Commissioner Vogel was very instrumental in producing, was released. The final water resilience portfolio was released on July 28th. So that was subsequent to our last commission meeting. And I reported in my written report what was included within that final. There was really no surprises from the draft. Obviously still a focus on building the single tunnel project, but other features that were actually quite favorable from a Delta perspective, or at least from our perspective of the Delta, that were included, including positive language regarding levee improvements and even real ideas that are pretty boutique in nature, such as developing a California equivalent to the National Flood Insurance Program, which is something that this commission has expressed interest on in the past. And then finally, under the broad umbrella of Delta conveyance, I wanted to say that on August 14th, I was able to present to the Delta Independent Science Board and was able to append onto a presentation from DWR about the Delta Tunnel project. And I was able to talk with the board about how best to incorporate best available science for Delta as place into the what we hope will be comments from the board, this independent science board, on the environmental impact report and statement for the Delta Tunnel project. And a copy of that written communication that I provided to the independent science board was sent out to commission members subsequent to that August 14th presentation. That's all I had on Delta conveyance. Let me hit a few other topics, and then if there are any questions on any of these items, I'd be happy to entertain them. Delta Leadership Program. This would have been our 6th Delta Leadership Program this fall, but we've decided that given likely COVID restrictions extending into the fall and winter, that we would not try to convene a program this year. We really don't believe we can do that program justice by convening people via computer squares like we're doing for this meeting. So we're going to defer the Delta Leadership Program for 2021, but in its place, we will focus on the alumni. We now have approximately 85 alumni of the program, including a few on this call, Commissioner Wynn, and most notable among them. So we'll be focusing on the alumni, both some continuing education opportunities, for lack of a better term, but also developing the alumni as a organized group, which we're quite excited about. And by we, I mean myself and Mike Campbell, the president of the Delta Regional Foundation. The Delta Regional Foundation is our partner for this leadership program. Moving on to the next topic, Vision 2030 is the Commission's strategic plan. Believe it or not, we're more than 5 years into the adoption of Vision 2030. It was adopted by the Commission in the spring of 2015, and it feels an appropriate time for us to take a review of what is in our Commission strategic plan. And we intend to initiate that by starting with a staff review. And at this point, my intention is to do a Commission check-in at the November 19th meeting, basically providing some initial input on initial thoughts on what we think might be worth review in our existing strategic plan. And at that time, we'll propose a process for also taking that out for additional input from the Delta community, I'm sure beginning with the Delta Protection Advisory Committee, but extending even beyond that. So just a heads up on that, but more to come. And I expect we'll have a more detailed discussion of that at our next Commission meeting. The Delta Heritage Forum will be held via Zoom on November 6th. We had hoped to do that in person, but we will conduct it via Zoom. And Blake Roberts, our Delta Heritage lead, is hard at work on the program for that. More information to come. Delta Transportation Challenges, and thanks to DPAC Vice Chair Barbara Daly for her comment earlier. Primarily working to try to convene a forum in the fall. That would be my hope, is that we could do it in the fall. And would certainly hope to have Assemblyman Fraser's involvement in that, in terms of, at the very least, kicking it off and ensuring that we can get good participation from Caltrans. I expect that we would have good participation from Caltrans, but I know that we would have good participation from Caltrans if Assemblyman Fraser were joining our gathering. We also want to schedule it in a way that Commission members can participate. We'd like to have county transportation officials participate, and of course, members of the Delta public as well. And this would be an opportunity to discuss those transportation challenges, to hopefully make some progress on future planning. And I'm doing some back-end work with Caltrans districts with really an eye toward improving planning and communication amongst the 3 districts. I think they do a good job already, but we can always improve upon things, and that would be my hope coming out of this transportation forum. That again, I hope that we will be able to conduct as we get further into the fall. Best of the Delta, we concluded our voting in July. The winners in the different categories are included in my executive director report. I'd encourage you to take a closer look. And we had greater voting this year than we've ever had in the past. So this is a project that actually started with the Delta Leadership Program, but it's really taken off and grown. And congratulations to the winners in those different categories. Delta Waterway Cleanup will be a physically distanced event this year. There will be no in-person large-scale cleanups because of the COVID restrictions, but we are encouraging people to clean up on their own, self-guided and close to home. September 26th is the date. We're trying to rally everyone to do that work, but of course people can do it at any time. And the Commission will assist with providing supplies for those who could use supplies for their efforts. And we are getting the word out about that, and we'll continue to in the coming weeks. Internally, both the Commission's current fiscal year budget and Commission staffing Our current fiscal year budget is a baseline. We did receive about a 7% reduction for salary savings, but other than that, it's a baseline budget. We don't expect to have any significant effects on how we operate as a commission. And on commission staffing, again, I also welcome Sis Hendricks as our new commission clerk. We've welcomed her on September 8th. She's been a great addition so far. We're thrilled that she's joined us. And then we have a new student assistant, Kevin Murphy, who joined us on August 19th. He's a master's student in recreation, parks, and tourism at Sacramento State. And finally, we are advertising for a program manager. This is to backfill the position that Melinda Doran held for the commission. And by the next time we meet, I hope that we can announce a new program manager for the commission. There were no land use comments. There are very few upcoming events. There's a more substantive commission projects update on pages 6 through 8 that I direct commission members to. And then finally, on page 9 of my report, there's a budget summary for the first 2 months of the fiscal year that we're in. And commission members, the last thing I'll announce is that I do plan to be away on vacation next week, but Assistant Executive Director Natasha Nilsson will be standing in ably and very capably in my absence, and I'll look forward to returning refreshed and hopefully breathing a lot of really good air when I return on September 28th. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Eric. Are there any questions by any members of the commission, or any questions or comments on anything that Eric's reported on? Okay. Don't see, unless I'm missing any, Natasha, I don't see any hands up. First of all, thank you, Erik, for a very, I think you're doing a wonderful job of certainly tracking the Delta conveyance work. I think this is the perfect forum with which to provide us regular updates as you're hearing what's happening. And I know that you're going to be preparing comments here in the near future. Also, thank you very much for your commission projects update. If commissioners have not had a chance to take a look at that, that's something relatively new Erik put together, volunteered to kind of put that together for those that are kind of tracking what work our staff are doing, particularly for new members of the commission, to get kind of a sense of kind of what kinds of things are the big ticket items that the Delta Protection Commission staff are working on. So thank you for that. All right, are there any public comments? Any hands raised, Natasha, on anything that Erik provided?
No, I do not see any in chat or as a raised hand.
Very
But
good.
just a reminder for those on the phone, you need to use your pound sign and then the number 2 in order to raise your hand.
Very good. Moving right along, item 8 is the DPAC report, and that's going to be provided by Mark Pruner. So Mark, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I on? Can you hear me okay?
I hear you great.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We met on, we met earlier this month, and it was our first Zoom meeting. We tried in the past to have socially distanced meetings, which we accomplished with some degree of reasonable success, I think. But this was a Zoom meeting, and we had 32 participants, by far our highest number of participants. So it was really great to see all the people that showed participated in the meeting. Many of them spoke. I thought it was a really good discussion and a great level of interest, active interest in the meeting. We always seem to meet for at least 2 hours, and this last meeting was no exception. We got another excellent update and report from Blake on staff about the new progress on moving forward with the Heritage Area Management Plan. We received a report from the Stakeholder Engagement Committee for the Water Contractors Committee. 2 of our members are active in that group. It's always very interesting and very important to keep updated on that. Erik, as always, gave a great staff report. And And we received something that I don't think was not on our agenda and didn't come through in the notes that you have, but we got the first public reveal of the new Delta Gate cross-channel project that's starting to make its way around to public comments. What that is apparently the cross-channel gates at Walnut Grove are old, decades old, and haven't had major overhaul or maintenance of a big magnitude for a long time. So Reclamation, Bureau of Reclamation, through one of our members, our federal members on our committee, gave us a first run through. We were the first group to get the handout, the quick run through the project, do some Q&A. So I think that'll be, it's just in the beginning stages of receiving public comment, and the project is still in a state of flux. But it was real helpful to get that look-see. I'm sure we'll look at that again. And I'm sure that the reclamation will come to the DPC for some comment. Lastly, we turn to something that some of our members had asked for, and I think is a great idea, and that's to be a little bit more deliberative and focused on coming up with a work plan, something that's a bit more organized, so we can best pass along our thoughts and recommendations to the commission. So among the topics that there was consensus built around were interfacing with the Delta Watermaster work group on dredging, but not just focusing on maybe traditional dredging issues, but thinking about the dredging and its multi-benefits and taking an honest, hard look at dredging in coordination with Delta Watermaster's group. And I'm curious to hear what the Watermaster reports a little bit later. I'm sure, hopefully he'll have an update on that. We also want to be a little bit more, try to get more ahead of the curve as much as we can with the Stewardship Council's activities as they continue to develop Delta Plan changes with focus on what those changes are and with a growing emphasis on the climate adaptation strategy. Weeds, as always, weeds are a popular topic to talk about because they're so impactful in many ways in the Delta. And then lastly, if we can, I know others have tried this, but try to come up perhaps with an improved or enhanced communications plan. Some ideas we hope that we can propose to the commission to improve outreach and communications between the commission and the folks in the Delta. So, and we'd love to hear, you know, there was a request for if any commissioners or the commission have any input. We really want to make sure we do what the commission wants us to do, or a very high level of enthusiasm to make that happen. And toward that end, as much as the commission at any point in time has input into our work plan, thinks we should remove items, add items, you know, reshuffle the deck as it were, we want to make sure we're checking in all the time, and including right now. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you, Mark, for that. Are there any commissioner comments or questions regarding Mark's DPAC report? Erik, did you have any thoughts or ideas that you wanted to share relative to the conversations we've been having about the DPAC and its responsibilities?
Well, you know, I think where DPAC has really helped has been those times when they've advanced recommendations to the commission, and that's, you know, led to some tangible effect once that radiated out from the commission to the intended party, whether it's the Delta Stewardship Council and how they look to construct or reconstruct, I guess, their Delta plan, or hopefully now with this most recent recommendation having to do with the Delta transportation challenges. anything that the commission is working on, we're always interested to have that input from the advisory committee. And so we're later in the meeting, we will propose an additional advisory committee related to the mandated management plan for the National Heritage Area. But I could still see DPAC playing an important role in that as well. And more our sister agencies are keen to work with DPAC to get input on items that they're working on. That, of course, will always be a tension and a challenge to make sure that, you know, we're focusing on the things that are most important to the commission rather than being responsive to our sister entities. But those are the items that really come up and stand at the fore. But I'm really interested in working with Chair Pruner and the members of that committee to help define a work plan. And, you know, we've been kind of operating fairly organically for quite a few years now. And maybe operating under a slightly more formalized work plan would be beneficial.
Yep, that makes all the sense. Are there any other thoughts or comments on that? I think a work plan makes sense. I know I've talked to Mark a little bit about it to get some, you know, guided focus on the work products, certainly for the next year. And so I think that would be that'd be a prudent path. Any other comments on that? Tasha, any public comment on his report?
I do not see any.
Okay. Mark, thank you very much for your continued work, and thank you, and thanks to the rest of the members as well.
Thank you as well.
Yep, thank you, Mark. Okay, we're slightly behind schedule, but we'll catch up. So item 9 is a report on the MWD Delta Islands. We've had extensive conversation about these in the past, and so here we are. I can't believe it's already been several years, but we're going to get an update from Stephen Arakawa, I believe. Is Stephen on the line with us? Do you know, Erik?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So the floor is yours, sir.
Hi, Chair Villegas. How are you?
Very good. How are you?
And good to see you and Chair Natoli and other members of the commission. Yeah, I'd like to go over where things are with the Delta Islands. It's been, I think a few years ago, our chair, Randy Record, and I came up to talk to the commission, and it was soon after we purchased the islands. And I think I would characterize that conversation as our interest in conveying that we were not looking to make any significant, severe, dramatic changes without doing a lot of thorough collaboration and thinking. And I know that there were concerns that were raised in that meeting about whether we're going to use those islands for storage of water, whether we're going to use, you know, the islands for tidal habitat, or, you know, are we going to pay our taxes? I think there was an overall concern that agriculture remains viable in the Delta. So those were the kinds of things that I remember hearing. And on the other hand, I was talking about things that we had an interest in. We talked about the levees because our water is dependent on moving water through the Delta to the south end and to the Banks pumping plant. And so our islands are adjacent to some pathways that are, you know, directly important to making sure that water gets to the pumps reliably. And so over this period of time, and we also talked about some science. We talked about looking at agricultural practices. Does carbon sequestration make sense? Those kinds of things. So I'm going to go over some of that today to just tell you where things are. But as of now, we're currently continuing to lease to farmers for agricultural production. So that hasn't changed. In fact, we just recently went public with a process to select leases for the next 5 years. So that's an indication that, you know, agriculture is still part of the area up there. And over this time period, I think, you know, I mentioned that we were wanting to get our feet on the ground and understand things, understand the business. And we really have, because we had the flood fights of 2017, where we had some threats to our island on Bouldin. some real levee threats there that was some real nervousness during the same time that the Oroville spillway was having trouble. We also come up on situations where we have some leakage and some buried pipes or other things that are in the levees that we suddenly discover are causing a threat, peat fires, things like that. And then understanding the relationships in the Delta, particularly with the reclamation districts, our own reclamation districts, the others, other consultants, our consultant with the reclamation district, MBK, but other consultants working for the reclamation districts in the Delta. And then lastly, just the nutrient invasion threats that we've been seeing and what kind of effect that can have on the Delta. But we have somebody on the ground there that's looking out for things. Russ Ryan works in the Sacramento office, and he's on the ground in the Delta on a regular basis. And we have Dave Forkel, who was with the previous owner, and we hired him after we purchased the islands. And so we feel like we have strong management effort on the islands. So today I want to go over with you, if I can have the second slide, some of the key areas that I wanted to highlight as far as what we're up to, what we're trying to do. And I think I'd lead off with levees, because levee stability, levee reliability is real important. And so along those lines, there has been some completed work on Bacon Island. We're in the northwestern section of Bacon Island. We completed a 7-mile levee improvement project, and that was a collaboration with some other urban agencies because there are other interests in that area as well because of the East Bay Mud Pipeline, and South Bay gets their water, San Francisco has got an interest. So that project was completed, and it was completed successfully to really improve the levee, to create more gentler side slopes, higher levee elevation, that kind of thing. And then we have been working with others, including the Department of Water Resources, to make sure that we have an emergency response plan in case of flooding, in case of earthquakes, that we have procedures that can jump in that action with the state, the federal, and the local agencies to make sure that after a big event, everybody knows what their roles are and what kind of contracts are in place and what kind of things need to happen logistically and contractually and those kinds of things. So the department actually did adopt a emergency response plan as it relates to protection of the Delta for flood failure, for seismic failure. And that was an important thing for our board because after Katrina, they were really focused on the Delta, and that was something that they really directed us to go and try to accomplish. And in this time period, a good amount of stockpiles occurred of rocks in the area at Rio Vista and Stockton. Also, warehousing facilities and other types of facilities needed to move rock, from loading and unloading and things like that. But at the same time, we've been working to improve the situation on our own islands with local stockpiles, and we're in the process of doing that to make sure that we have the right flood fighting equipment and materials in order to deal with situations as they arise. I think that the key thing is making sure that, working closely with the reclamation districts and with other agencies that we have a plan that will work. And so testing that plan on a regular basis to make sure that either tabletop or other types of exercises, we can be convinced that we have a response plan that will actually work. The next slide. So the other thing that we're looking at is what kind of equipment and what kind of technology and other types of efforts can actually help us to understand the condition of the levees. A lot of times things are hidden. You can't always see, particularly on the water side, because of all of the vegetation and all. And also within the levee, you can't always see what's underneath. What kind of voids do you have within the levee? So we've been really looking at different things to understand how you can monitor to identify voids, how you can monitor to identify pipes or siphons that are buried in there that you don't know are in there, other types of materials that may be causing a threat to the levee stability. We've done a lot of analysis, engineering type analysis to understand the profile of the levees and what type of deformation you would expect if you had a major earthquake in the Delta or even a minor earthquake in the Delta, what kind of ground motion, what kind of expected change in the levee profile or the levee elevation, so that we know that when we actually do improve these levees, we're building them to the level that can reduce and to the greatest degree possible the risk that there is from these levees. And we do coordinate with other reclamation districts because all of this is important to the Delta. So working with other consultants and other reclamation districts that are working with those consultants to make sure we're sharing information. Next slide. So on environmental protection, one of the things that's popped up in the last few years is invasive species, nutria. And nutria are these beaver-like animals, as you can see with this picture, but they can cause a lot of havoc, as you know, more than anybody. And so they can actually cause a lot of destruction to the environment, but to the levees themselves, there can be big dens of these embedded in the levees, and just being on top of the migration of these animals and where do they cause the greatest threat. So we've been involved in supporting detection stations and cameras on our island to understand the movement of these nutria. And we're also working with Cal Fish and Wildlife to conduct field investigations so that we know where things might be going on that. We're looking at using, maybe working with USDA, looking at maybe using dogs, because we understand that dogs can actually be a good detector of this. And we were looking to do that, but with the COVID-19 kind of pushed it off, but we're still planning to do that. So those are some of the kind of things that we're looking to accomplish. All of this is environmental because this kind of invasive animal can create a lot of impact. Next slide. On some of the science research, we've done some work to understand how fish in the Delta, when they migrate, what kind of susceptibility do they have to predation. So we did a pen study. This is a picture of it on the left, a pen study where we put some predators and moved some salmon through there and found that certain types of conditions may be favorable or unfavorable to protecting the native salmon that are moving through the system. And I think there's more work to be done on that, but it's been a useful foundational study for additional work. And I think there's more study that can be done looking at physical structures in different areas and how they might be impacting or contributing to predation. So we're looking to do some more of that. I think what we're looking for is we applied for a grant with Cal Fish and Wildlife. It was a Prop 1 grant to evaluate opportunities to improve things in the Delta, and that could be agriculture, could be environmental, and it would be a collaborative effort. And we're in the process of working out the details with them on a grant funding agreement, but it would allow us to factor in things like wildlife, birds, factor in different types of agricultural practices that may make sense for the sustainability of the Delta, to help with subsidence, to help with soil chemistry, maybe looking at different ways to improve the productivity and make maybe marginal lands more productive. So we're really looking forward to that. We expect some more progress and development on that as we get to the end of the year or earlier in 2021. So that's a collaborative effort that we intend to be involved with a lot of different stakeholders on. And if I could have the next slide. On agricultural sustainability, I think the more we talk about different parties in the Delta and interests, we're really interested in looking at rice cultivation. It may have multiple benefits, may help with helping to reverse some subsidence in the Delta, but also may have other benefits as well, including habitat. And so we're still in discussions about how that could be applied to our islands. Polluted is an effort where you grow certain types of plants, or could be crop type plants or other types of plants, and you can harvest a portion of that, and some of that could be biomass for fuel, and some of that could actually be to put back into the soil. So we're looking at that as well. And then regenerative ag, to see if there's ways of improving the productivity through less tillage, maybe less mechanical, maybe less chemical, more ground cover, but we're collaborating with different parties and universities to see what the possibilities are there. And we are looking forward to working with other interests in the Delta on that. And then last, on carbon capture, the Air Resources Board has been going through a process to develop a protocol for how carbon credits might be provided. And we've been working through that process, mainly on the voluntary part of that, to see if that could be viable in the Delta as well, so that it can be a source of revenue and provide an economic support to the region, and also help protect the Delta. Next slide. So along with that carbon sequestration, the entities that we're working with are the Delta Conservancy, the Department of Water Resources, and then I mentioned UC Berkeley, UC Davis, and Riverside as far as academics, Air Resources Board, and the Nature Conservancy. And I think I mentioned that this is to help verify the carbon credits for the voluntary market. Next slide. So I think the collaboration is key. Russ Ryan, who I mentioned earlier, who is with Metropolitan, is part of the Delta Protection Advisory Committee. And so that's been really helpful to us to be a part of your efforts and to be a part of the community. And we plan to continue doing that. He's also there representing the state water contractors. So that has an added benefit of bringing in other state water project contractors into the issues that we're all talking about here. And then continuing to work with the reclamation districts on levees. We've done some work with different entities on seismic levee analysis, as I mentioned earlier, and then on different types of surveys, whether it be crane surveys or other birds surveys, working with different entities on that. So I think as we continue to plan for this planning grant and look at what's possible, I think collaborating with these parties and others, I think will be very important. Next. That might be it. So I think I just want to close. My final remarks are, we're taking a deliberate approach. I don't believe we've jumped off the deep end in terms of changing the land use. We're continuing to have agriculture. As I mentioned, paying the reclamation district assessments, paying the taxes. We're not pursuing any island storage. So this is a picture of where we're at today, and there's more work to be done, and it's over the longer term. So more collaboration to go, and we're prepared to do that. And I appreciate the time to go over this today.
All right, well, thank you. And thank you for coming, and thank you for joining us. Obviously, the topics that you've hit on were important to us, as are many others. Are there any commissioner comments or questions of this evening's presentation? A quiet group tonight. Natasha, I don't see any hands up unless you're seeing anything different than I am.
There are no hands, and I have nothing in the chat.
Okay. All right. Are there any public hands up?
That would be the pound sign and the 2 if you want to raise your hand and you're only on a phone. We do have at least 4 callers only on a phone.
Okay. Any with hands raised?
No, still none.
Okay, still none. Okay. All right, very good. Well, I thank you for first of all, Mr. Arakawa, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I distinctly remember the evening when you were last with us, and there was a lot of concern and questions about exactly what were the plans and where would we be today as it relates to the importance of these islands in the Delta, and a lot of concerns for good reason. And I appreciate you coming back. You know, I suspect a lot of the concerns continue to remain, but it's very helpful to have you with us this evening to talk about things that we do have a common interest in, and that is, you know, the voluntary market with the carbon sequestration and the levee work and the environmental science work and the ag sustainability without question. So those items continue to be important to this body, and I suspect that in the future, we'd love to have you come back and continue to update us on the status of the work that you're doing and what we can anticipate going forward.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it, and I really appreciate getting to know all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Good seeing you.
All right, that takes care of item 9. We are now moving on to item 10, which is a report on from the Delta Watermaster activities. And I believe Michael George is with us this evening.
Yes, good evening. Everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I just want to start out by commending Steve Arakawa and his team from Metropolitan Water District. I remember the concerns when they bought those islands. In fact, a few days after that transaction closed in 2016, I went over to MWD's office in Sacramento, met with Roger Patterson and others in the team to discuss my concerns as Delta Watermaster and my interest in working with them. And I have to say that in the 4 years since, Metropolitan has proved itself to be an extremely responsible owner and steward of their properties in the Delta. And in addition to a number of the things that Steve mentioned, I would commend Metropolitan and particularly Russ Ryan and his sub-team on their contributions to the Delta Measurement Experimentation Consortium and the development of an alternative plan of compliance to avoid the need to put a measuring device on every diversion in the Delta and to get better, more real-time information from satellite measurements. So they've been a real helpful participant and collaborator, putting their shoulder to the wheel, putting their time, effort, you know, on a lot of things in the Delta to make things better, to understand things better, and to find out what the facts are. So I think it's appropriate to recognize that they really have been good stewards and good members of our community. And with that, I'll start on my presentation, which is the regular update on what we're doing in the Office of Delta Watermaster that impact the Delta Protection Commission, your interests, as well as broader interest in the Delta. So if I could have the next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about what the pandemic response has meant to our efforts. I want to spend a good deal of time talking about our 2020 work plan initiatives, where we are in that process and how we proceeded, where we see the emerging challenges, and then where we're collaborating with others. I've just mentioned Metropolitan Water District, and there are a number of other things in that category as well. So next slide, please. With respect to the pandemic, we have had to basically suspend field operations or cut them dramatically back. So now when we're in the field, we're usually out there alone or, you know, in very small groups with appropriate distancing and so forth, and only when necessary. And for instance, twice in the last month, we've had to deploy field inspections in the southern part of the Delta because of specific challenges that were time limited and acute. So we got out there, but we've done far less field inspection than we have done in the past, or than we had intended to do in our 2020 work plan. But we've adjusted pretty well to remote operations. The staff that we've got are teleworking. We're all doing as we're doing tonight, a lot of virtual meetings. And one of the things that I would say is that the virtual meetings work very well in circumstances like we're talking about here, where we've been together, where we've developed relationships, where we know each other. It's much harder to establish relationships with new entities, with new people, with new stakeholders in this virtual environment. And as we've gone on now for 6 months in this circumstance, we're recognizing more and more the importance of the relationships that we've already developed, but the need to continue to develop those relationships on a continuous basis as the Delta evolves and as different interests emerge and change. We also adjusted to the pandemic by volunteering one of our members, John Collins, our senior environmental scientist. I said volunteered. I would rather say that he was voluntold. He's part of the 5% that the governor took out of the California state workforce and redeployed for contract tracing. So we've got our senior environmental scientist deployed from his home base in Davis, but doing contract tracing for the Los Angeles County Department of Public Works. So we're eager to get the pandemic under control and get John back. But those are the issues that have impacted us with respect to the pandemic. Next slide, please. So our work plan initiatives, and I've used this slide because what we're doing in the Office of the Delta Watermaster is really against the backdrop of some pretty extensive battles that are going on. I feel sometimes like the Titans are exchanging thunderbolts above our heads, and we're trying to stay low, stay away from the lightning strikes, and get things done on a cooperative basis where that's possible, notwithstanding the outbreak of a lot of litigation and strife in various issues in various parts of the Delta. So our biggest issue here is to be prepared for the next water shortage, the next drought, and chief among those is to improve the quality of our data and the transparency and accessibility of that data. One of the things we recognized, all of us jointly as a community, was that in the last drought, we lacked accurate, comprehensible, accessible data that would allow us to make better real-time decisions during crunch time. So one of the big things that we've been doing is try to improve the quality of our data. And that has often meant working with the water use community in the Delta to improve both our procedures, our electronic records management system to make it easier for people to report, to help them understand what their responsibilities are, and to get the quality of that reporting up. Because as I've indicated in the past, over the last few years, the Delta has really done a terrific job of filing its water use reports on a timely basis. In fact, I'm proud to say that in the Delta, the water use community has a far higher compliance record than in California generally. That's largely due to the relationships that we've developed and the relationships that the Commission as well as the Delta water agencies have with the water users in the Delta. So that if somebody is late in filing his report, it's not so much that we in the Office of Delta Watermaster have to go out and, you know, theoretically or virtually knock on their doors. We publish a list of delinquents or late reports to the Delta water agencies, and to a large extent, they go out and assist their constituents. So we have 100% compliance with Delta reporting. And that has allowed us to work more on quality control, quality management, improving through discussions with water users, the quality of the data that they provide. One of the things that has come out of that is the recognition that deterioration, particularly in the southern delta, is accelerating at an alarming rate. We are losing water supply functional capability as well as ecosystem functionality in the South Delta at an alarming rate. And when I talked before about reduced inspections in the Delta and talked about 2 acute situations, those were both in the Delta where we had problems with water levels, with water quality, with harmful algae bacteria, with outbreaks of invasive weeds, with low dissolved oxygen, with lesser throughput, with interferences with navigation. All those things are really concentrated in the South Delta. And as I've said to the Commission before, most of the restoration efforts are really concentrated in the northwest part of the Delta and in the central Delta corridor. And we really haven't figured out a strategy for arresting the deterioration of the southern Delta. So we've been spending a lot of time trying to improve the data and increase understanding. Mark Pruner mentioned before one of the efforts in that, which is to see if we can do a better job of Delta channel maintenance. I'll talk more about that in another slide. And of course, we have been taking very targeted enforcement actions. I'm very pleased that enforcement is rarely necessary in the Delta. It is almost universally the case that when we have a problem, we have access either directly or directly plus through our intermediaries, the water agencies, the commission, the science program, or others, to explain to water users in the Delta why their compliance with regulations and reporting is important, not only to us as regulators or as overseers of the diversion system, but for the community itself. So enforcement action is very rarely necessary. However, in the last year, we have, for the first time, revoked a license in the Delta for failure to follow the terms and conditions in that license. We did that after a lot of remedial work that just didn't result in compliance. And so we ended up revoking a license. In addition, we had in the North Delta a plain and simple scofflaw who tested the issue of whether he was required to file reports at all. And we took enforcement action and ended up imposing a fairly substantial fine that didn't need to be imposed, but for credibility of the enforcement system, we did take that action. So I believe strongly that we work with our constituents to bring them into compliance. I'd much rather do that than enforcement. But in circumstances where compliance isn't possible or where we don't get that cooperation, we're not afraid to take enforcement action. Next slide, please. So in terms of improving Delta data quality and transparency, we are continuing that education outreach, moving beyond the failure to file and transitioning to QA, QC, as I mentioned. And one of the places I want to focus on that, the picture on the right, is Holland Tract, where we have a very specific pilot project where we've decided to dive deep into one island, see if on that one island we can get improved reporting so that our records and the users' records are consistent and informative. And here's another place where we got excellent cooperation from Metropolitan Water District. They own about 75% of the land mass of Holland Tract. And they've been extraordinarily helpful. In fact, we had a 2-hour meeting yesterday with Russ Ryan and with his water lawyers and his water engineers from MBK, giving an interim update on our deep dive onto Holland Tract. The idea here is to take what is frankly a fairly simple island, about 4,500 acres, with a single reclamation district with one license and a total of 15 independent statements, 14 of which are owned by Metropolitan, one by another inholder, and really dive deep down, crawl all the way to the bottom of the rabbit hole, figure everything out, come out with a unified sense of what's going on, what the water rights are, how they're being exercised, where the diversions are, where the places of use related to those diversions are, and to clean up the data so that we can say anything you want to know about Holland Tract is accurately reflected in the electronic water rights information management system. And that's a big pilot that we're doing with the idea of applying that other places around the Delta. And I'm pleased to say that we have already gotten a volunteer from McDonald Island, Reclamation District 2030 in the Central Delta. And they've said to us, come and do that with us. We're anxious to have a common understanding with the Delta Watermaster of what our water rights are so that you know what we know, and we can operate on a basis where the facts are clear, and then we can discuss what the implications and the policy procedures from those are, what we should do with the facts that we have in common, so that we're not arguing about what the facts are, we're arguing about what the policy implications of those facts are, which is a healthy discussion we think to have. And so one of the things that's come out of this is that there are some real problems, and all of you who are water users in the Delta know there are problems with the State Water Board's electronic information management system. And I want to assure you that we in the Delta Watermaster's office, in conjunction with our Division of Water Rights and with the full support of the Water Board, are working on what we've started to think of as ERIMS 3.0. Actually, we're going to call it the Water Rights Information System, WRIS. It's the next generation of this. And one of the principal things that we're trying to do is say, we don't need to develop another system that just works for the Water Board. We need to develop another system that takes all the information that the Water Board gathers and that users provide and make it more transparent, more credible, more available on a real-time basis with much lower friction, so that we can all have a better sense for what is going on in the Delta. Next slide, please. So as we unpack the water use in the Delta, like I've talked about with the pilot projects at McDonald Island and Holland Tract, we're also systematically, where it comes up, trying to apply the principles that we've enunciated about overlapping water rights in the Delta. As a lot of you know, there has been confusion over time, some maybe not just confusion, but obfuscation about what the actual water rights are, how they interact with each other. How, for instance, a riparian right and a licensed right and a pre-14 right, all of which may be claimed to provide water for the same point of use, maybe even through the same point of diversion, how they react and interact with each other. So we're working on that. We've also identified circumstances of duplicate reporting. So you do have the same molecules of water directed to the same place of use to grow the same crops, diverted through the same diversion, but reported on two different reports. One, the report of the licensee that comes in February, April, and the other, the report of the statement diversion of use, the pre-14 and riparian rights that aren't due till July. So identifying those duplicate reportings, we're now working with the community to reduce that duplicate reporting so that we make sure that we're only counting the molecules that are actually used. Because one of the things that has become very clear to me in my 5.5 years as Delta Watermaster is that we misunderstand, misstate, and are misguided by our misunderstanding of how much water is actually used in the Delta. It's far less than is reported because we have got these circumstances, number one, of duplication, number two, of honest error, where, for instance, somebody reports on a form a number that the reporter thinks of as gallons, but he puts it in the box that says it's acre feet. And so you've got hundreds of thousands of acre feet reported where it's only hundreds of thousands of gallons. And it really skews the view when you aggregate those data about how much water is used in the Delta. And we're finding, and we think we're going to be able to report systematically over time, what the actual consumption of water is in the Delta. And it's substantially less than we have assumed in certain of our models and in certain of our management approaches. So we're taking a new direction with that water use management. And again, this is an area where we've had tremendous cooperation with Metropolitan Water District, but also with RD 999, with RD 2068, with Pescadero Irrigation District, with the Nature Conservancy, with Freshwater Trust, with local agencies of the North Delta, with a lot of the constituent members who have worked with us to experiment about how we can better implement the measurement requirement in SB 88. We adopted regulations to implement that. It very quickly became apparent to us that there were real challenges in the Delta that made that difficult. So we put together this Delta Measurement Experimentation Consortium so that people could share their results, their triumphs and their tragedies, what works, what doesn't work, and so that we don't have to repeat the same expensive mistakes as we try and figure out how to do a better job of figuring out how water is used in the Delta. And one of the things the consortium has done recently is to take a new direction to look at a new tool, new science that's emerged about estimating crop ET from computer analysis of satellite images. And we think by engaging that new technology and developing a Delta-wide alternative compliance plan so that we can get more consistent, more timely, more accurate information on the major water use that is both measurable and manageable in the Delta, and that's crop water consumption. By definition, in terms of developing that alternative plan of compliance, we've got to ground truth the satellite images. So we've got a proposal for a network of measured diversions. So it'll be less than 3,000 diversion, less than all the diversion in the Delta, but a robust network of well-managed, well-designed, accurate measurements, telemetered, so that we get real-time information and we don't have to wait till the following July to get information that, even if it were accurate, would be in the following agricultural year and would be of limited value in terms of managing in times of shortage. So I think this is a breakthrough of getting better, more actionable, more apparent, more transparent, and more accessible data on actual water use in the Delta. Next slide, please. And then we're addressing common problems. And the first one I want to go back to, because I've talked about this before, is administration of Term 91. And if I could ask you to move to the next slide, and I'll warn you that I'm going to ask you to come back to a different slide or the last slide in a moment. But what I've asked you to put up here is a slide that is available. This is updated every Friday, and it's accessible through the Division of Water Rights website, as well as the Delta Watermaster website. And this is to help those who have Term 91 in their license right have a sense that we've got of when that license is likely to be curtailed because of the Term 91 conditions. So what we've tried to do is take all the complexity behind this, because data comes from lots of different sources and it measures lots of different things that are difficult to understand, difficult to put in one frame, put all that complexity in the background and get the Department of Water Resources, the Bureau of Reclamation, the Division of Water Rights, the state project contractors, the federal project contractors, the Delta Watermaster's office, the State Water Board, all to agree on the complexity that's behind this, and then to put it into terms that are relatively simple to understand. So what goes on here is essentially anytime that thick blue line is above the zero line, that's a situation where Term 91 can be triggered. because the delta is in balanced condition and the projects are releasing previously stored water in order to maintain balance in the delta. And you can see a couple of things in this graph. For instance, if you take a look in late spring, you see that line going up above the 0 line. But we knew, because of the forecasts of late spring storms, that it was likely to come back down, and it did. And so working with the projects for whose protection we would invoke Term 91, we agreed not to invoke it, notwithstanding the fact that we knew that the conditions were in place, but would only be in place for a short period of time. Then, after things started to dry out, we saw that line go back up, and we actually invoked Term 91 on July 5th. But you can see again, it was after the conditions, after anybody who was looking at these graphs could see that those conditions were coming into being, and they could see a bright line when Term 91 went into effect. Then fast forward, we saw a period here late in the summer where it looked like we were going to take Term 91 off. But again, in consultation, we recognized that there were going to be some additional flows connected with previously approved water transfers that were going to come through the delta. We're going to put more water through the delta and take the burden off the projects. And so we left Term 91 on for that few days. And now you see it's coming down again. We're at the cusp. It's likely that Term 91 is probably going to come off sometime either late this month or early next month. But I point this out as the value of getting a better handle on data, getting all the players, some of whom provide that data, some of whom rely on that data, to understand it, to put all that complexity behind the screen, if you will, where it's accessible. So anybody who wants to check on the accuracy or the propriety of the data that we're relying on can get to it. But if all you need is a snapshot, this tells you what's going on. And I use this as an example of what we're trying to do more generally in making our data accessible to people so that they can make plans and they can respond knowing what we know. So now if you go back to the last slide, because this was just an example, I also want to talk about telemetry compliance, because under SB 88, we require that anybody who diverts through a single diversion more than 10,000 acre feet in a year has a responsibility to telemeter that data to the water board. Although we recognize that we were late in figuring out how we would use that data. And so instead of having everybody put in the telemetry data, send it to us and have it go into a box somewhere where it never looked at, we again engage with the community to say, let's discuss this process so that we can work with you, you can work with us, so that we make this information better, so that when we telemeter and we've got real-time information, it's understandable, it's accessible. Similarly, I think with the Delta Conveyance project, the stakeholder engagement committee that other people have referred to, I think that's more than just window dressing on the same old Delta Conveyance project. This is a real way of engaging between the people who are designing that project and the people who are in its path or who are having a stake in where it goes, what its alignment is, how big it is, how it's going to be operated, and what the constraints are going to be. And I want to commend the Delta Conveyance JPA for really listening to that stakeholder engagement committee. I'm not a member of the committee, but I sure audit it at their meetings every month. And they listen, they take feedback, and they make adjustments to the design based on that input. Now, not everybody, in fact, on the engagement committee, it's mostly people who oppose the project, but they're listened to and they are able to provide insight and input that has real impact on the conveyance project. So whereas I think it was a fair criticism that in the BDCP and the water fix, that was all kind of top down. obviously, this is still under the Newsom administration. It's a Newsom reset for a one-tunnel operation, but it's being designed on a much better basis. And I have felt very much that we've got a much better engagement process for the Office of Delta Watermaster with this project, while we can have that colloquy and attack problems that are common to us all. Next slide, please. And we can go beyond that. So I want to just take a moment and focus on the acceleration of the South Delta. The picture there on the right is the picture of Tom Paine Slough. And you can see that that slough has silted up, as have a few places in the North Delta. For instance, up in Cache Slough or some place on one of the forks of the McCullamy River. We've got this problem that because it has been so difficult, it's so expensive, it's so difficult to permit, there's this notion that the permitting regulations, which are designed for somebody who wants to put a strip mall in a wetland, but it also prevents channel maintenance of these engineered channels, so that we get the problems that we've seen this summer in terms of early and extensive blooms of HABs, lower dissolved oxygen that make it difficult for fish passage, impossibility to get a reasonable amount of water through these conveyance channels, real flood control problems, because obviously that channel is not going to convey flood water the way it was designed or the way the flood control project expects it to do. So we pulled together, and Mark called it the Delta Watermaster's leadership. Actually, this leadership has come from farmers in the Delta, from the projects, from the export interests, from the flood control agencies, from boating and waterways, all people who recognize that this is a problem that is shared and agreed to come to the table and say, we're not going to point fingers. We're not going to say it's more your problem than my problem, or you're causing me a problem. We're all in this together. And unless this gets solved, we will lose the function of the South Delta. And that has terrible implications for land management, for farming, for export management and control, for water quality, for fish passage, for navigation, for all of it. So this is an effort to bring everybody together. And I'm very pleased that the North Delta Water Agency and the Citizen Advisory Committee to the Commission have gotten involved in this, because it is a Delta-wide problem, even though it's most acute and we're probably going to have to attack it first in the South Delta. This is a problem that we all share, that if we don't solve, we will lose the Delta as a functioning freshwater estuary. And that's a huge problem for all of us. Next point I want to make here about the South Delta is we've got to make a decision, what I call a toggle switch decision, about what we're going to do at the head of Old River. In the past, there has been a suggestion that what we need is an operable barrier there, so that when we want to pass fish through that area and keep them in the main stem of the San Joaquin River so that they get out to the ocean, so that they can fatten up and mature and come back and spawn in their natal streams on the San Joaquin River and its tributaries, we got to make a decision. Are we going to have an operable barrier to keep those fish in the main stem of the San Joaquin River, and therefore focus on refuge and the ability to get those out-migrating smolt through the main stem of the San Joaquin and out to the ocean? Or are we not going to build that head of Old River barrier and recognize that that means that as those little fishies swim up trying to get out to the ocean, half of them are going to turn left at the head of Old River. And that's not a good left turn, because then they're drawn to the pumps, they're drawn to these highly occluded channels where there is low dissolved oxygen, where often they're so choked with weeds that a fish can't make it through, where they're easy prey for predators. So we've got to make that decision. And I'm trying, with the support of both the Delta Stewardship Council and the Water Board, to get this issue raised in the collaborative science and adaptive management program, so that we can get scientists to study this and come to a conclusion about what I think is this toggle switch issue. And then, of course, we've got the big issues of flood, drought, and fish protection on the lower San Joaquin River that has spawned a lot of controversy, a lot of contention, and a lot of litigation. But while those titans are exchanging the thunderbolts above our heads, I'm pleased to say that we're also convening collaborative work groups of people who actually work for people who are suing each other and saying we are suing each other. Our view on these critical issues are going to have to be hashed out in litigation. We differ with each other, but there are things that we still need to talk about. There are things that we still need to understand in common, and there are no regrets actions that we can take while we wait for the lawyers in the courts to figure out what's going to happen at the denouement of that litigation. Next slide, please. And then the targeted enforcement actions. I don't want to go into any more of those than I already have, but I do want to say that the Tanaka decision, which has been 10 years in litigation, finally went final on August 18th when the Supreme Court declined to review the final decision, what is now the final decision of the 3rd District Court of Appeals. That's a very valuable, whether you are on the winning side or the losing side, and I don't have a side, I just want to know what the law is. But now we have guidance about how to apply the review of riparian claims in the Delta. And that's going to be very helpful as we, with the community, begin to apply those principles in the Delta. It will have the effect of clarifying what are riparian claims and how they get validated. And it allows us to restart what I think are very fruitful settlement negotiations that are underway between my office and 5 separate responses in these heritage cease and desist orders that have been outstanding for 10 years. I feel very confident now that Tanaka has been decided that we have a path in common with the respondents to come to resolution of those cases through settlement rather than a final cease and desist order. Next slide, please. We've got
Mr. George, can I interrupt you for a quick second? Can I ask just in terms of the number of slides left for your presentation, only because I want to make sure I'm managing the time here because we have 2 more items. How many more slides do you have?
You bet, Oscar. This is the last one and I'll go quickly.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay. So what are the emerging challenges? We are trying to clean up our regulations, our statutes, and our internal protocols so that the community of water users in the Delta can do what they want to do, which is comply, and comply with less friction than they've had in the past. We're working on that. We are trying to work on implementing the portion of the water quality control plan that has already been adopted, even though it's subject to litigation, and hopefully figure out ways to implement the vision of the Water Board for the water quality control plan through voluntary agreements. Now, honestly, the voluntary agreement has really been put on the back burner since February, when I think there was a breakthrough in terms of the state family, DWR and Fish and Wildlife, and Watermaster, et cetera, coming to agreement on a framework for voluntary agreements. But then we got the federal BIOPS, we got the state incidental take permit, litigation ensued, and that took a lot of the air out of the room for voluntary agreements. I and a lot of other people hope that there will be room as some of the litigation clarifies and as potentially some of the politics settles down after election, that we'll return to some voluntary agreements as mechanisms for implementing higher water quality control with more real-time analysis and better real-time management of the system. We're trying to also advance the objectives enunciated in the governor's resilience portfolio, which went final in July. And as Erik Vink mentioned, there are a number of things in there that are very helpful for the Delta. And we're already seeing, and I give Nancy Vogel, Commissioner Vogel in this circumstance, kudos for trying to tease out of that resilience portfolio, where are the opportunities for no regrets, multi-benefit projects in the Delta. So even though we may have disagreements, let's say about the tunnels, that's a years off. What can we do today to develop some trust, better relationships, the ability to work together on matters of common interest, nutria control, levee maintenance, channel maintenance, those kinds of things. Where are the multi-benefit projects where we can find common ground and actually make progress that none of us will ever regret? And I think that is an important thing to do, particularly now when the state budget and probably other budgets as well are so constrained. It's more important than ever to take what money and what mind share is available and focus it where we can make a real difference. So we're doing that through encouraging adaptive management and these multi-benefit projects, and seeing if we can craft trade-offs that will help us make progress while we wait for resolution from the courtroom that you see there on the right. So last slide, I think, is just opportunity for questions or to talk about where we're cooperating with others. And so Chair Villegas, I'll turn it back to you, and happy to answer questions if there are any.
Wonderful. And thank you very much. And as always, thank you for making the time, and always very informative. And I find the pilot project that you referenced earlier in your presentation fascinating, because I'm curious to see how that turns out, because it's always, as you said, it's almost impossible to craft effective, thoughtful public policy during the crisis and during the times of, 2014, 15, and 16, when the curtailments were just overwhelming folks. It's almost impossible to have an honest conversation about water usage and the appropriate degree of curtailment, and how do we manage a system that's imperfect. So I love the fact that this pilot is underway, and I hope that it provides the kind of data that you have referenced going forward, so that in the event that we will need to have a broader conversation about drought conditions, how can we manage that a little better? So are there any questions of Mr. George by any members of the commission?
Yeah, I guess this is Don. Totally, I just had a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Michael. Yeah, thanks, Michael, for your presentation. Just two slides back, you under the enforcement actions and the Tanaka decision. One more there. So, what are those bullet points? Were those folks where you're a part of this litigated decision, or as it applied, or what? I didn't understand what those.
Certainly, Don. So, 10 years ago, cease and desist orders were issued against, I want to say, maybe 20 water users, primarily in the Central and South Delta. As you know, in the North Delta, there is a water supply contract that's kind of a security blanket around any water rights. So even if there were questionable water rights or questionable claims, we don't bother with them in the North Delta because that contract. But in Central and South Delta, where there is no such contract, the Division of Water Rights, before there was a Delta Reform Act in 2009, issued about 15 cease and desist orders alleging unlawful diversions in portions of the Central and South Delta focused on Roberts Island. A couple of those went to hearing, but didn't get decided, in large part because Tanaka, which was among that group, was proceeding slowly through the courts. And I don't know if it was anybody's conscious decision, but the fact is that they waited to make decisions in some of these cases. Well, so it came to me as Delta Watermaster now to take over the prosecution of 5 of those historic, what I call heritage, cease and desist orders. Okay. And what I did was say to the respondents and to our administrative hearing office that I'd like to wait and see the final decision in Tanaka, see what we can learn from that litigation, and then see if we can agree how to apply those principles. And that's what we're doing now. And I'm very confident, Commissioner Natoli, that we will settle all 5 of those within the next month or 6 weeks, because we are on a schedule to go to hearing if we can't settle them. In addition, there are 2 cases that went to the Water Board and went to full hearings 10 years ago on which there still aren't decisions. So I'm hopeful that the Tanaka decision and possibly these settlements may have a positive impact on getting all those things, all those outstanding old claims of unlawful diversions settled on a basis that makes sense to everybody, because we agree on what the facts are and what the principles to apply to those facts are.
Very good. Thanks for the explanation. You're a wealth of knowledge. It's fascinating listening to you. It just keeps coming, but with all the information, things you're working on. But thanks for your efforts and for your leadership as well. Thanks.
Well, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come and have this conversation with you every, so 4, 5, 6 months.
So I don't see, at least here, there are any other hands raised. Is there any other comments or questions by any members of the commission? I'm not seeing any hands up as I scroll through. Natasha, are there any hands raised from members of the public?
No, there's been no chats or emails.
All right, very good. All right, Mr. George, thank you so much. As usual, thank you for all your as Don said, your wealth of knowledge, and it's always appreciative you coming in and sharing it with us. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, that was, let's see, that was item 10. So item 11 is a report on the 2020 Flood Preparedness Week and consideration of a resolution in support of Flood Preparedness Week. So I believe, Stacy, you're presenting that, correct?
Yes, thank you, Chair Villegas and commissioners. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of our efforts to share flood preparedness in the Delta this year. Of course, things are a little bit different due to COVID-19, but there's still a lot of options that we have that we're working on. One, of course, is that we're continuing with our popular Delta Flood Preparedness calendar this year. The 2021 calendar is completed, and there is also a focus on the National Heritage Area in the calendar this year as well. We are working with DWR on getting those printed again so we can continue to mail out to the roughly 5,300 residential addresses in the primary zone of the Delta, throughout the Delta. Some targeted areas there. So we're looking forward to that. And then from there, of course, we are going to develop a little bit more of a robust online campaign, as almost everybody is doing right now for most of their efforts. So that'll be happening during the Flood Preparedness Week. Also, between now and then, we're going to continue to partner with the River Delta Unified School District, as we have in the past, trying to get that really pertinent information out to those Delta families, contacts, setting up kits, emergency kits, just lots of information packed in. And again, doing that both in English and in Spanish. And then also working on putting together a very small curriculum this year, which is new, that the teachers can actually share online as well with their students. So we have a lot of partners throughout the state who have done some really great things that we're going to leverage, such as some online games and various other options. So we'll put a nice package together and give teachers that option as well. Getting the kids involved, especially with them being home and parents being so involved in their school right now, is kind of a great way to reach adults also. And a new thing this year as well, we're really excited to be partnering with Latino Times. So they're really interested in helping us spread the word, again, in both in English and Spanish as well. So I have a few different avenues that we're working on this year. Some are popular avenues, and some we continue to grow, as well as some new ones. So we're always looking for ways to continue to spread the message about flood awareness and safety, particularly in the rural areas of the Delta, and making sure that we are reaching underserved populations as well. With that said, this year is a little bit different as well. Normally, we would have Delta Flood Preparedness Week the week before California Flood Preparedness Week. DWR, who oversees California Flood Preparedness Week, has really talked to all of their partners throughout the state and really ask that everybody kind of get on board with 1 week and put all of their efforts in that 1 week so we can really collaborate and just get a lot of information, out there all at once that people, just kind of can't miss. So with that said, California Flood Preparedness Week is going to be the week of October 17th through the 24th. So I am asking the commission today to adopt resolution 20-01 declaring October 17th through the 24th, 2020 to be Delta Flood Preparedness Week.
All right, so thank you very much, Stacy, for your work on that. And so members of the commission, you've heard we need a adoption of a resolution unless there are any comments or questions, or there are any comments or questions from members of the public.
This is Diane. I make a motion to approve that.
All right, Diane, thank you for that. Do we have a second?
This is Nancy Vogel. I second that motion.
Thank you, Nancy. So we have a motion and a second. And Natasha, is there any hands raised? I don't see any.
No, I've not seen.
Okay, very good. So with that motion and a second, Madam Clerk, if you'll take the roll call vote on that.
Chair Villegas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Natoli. Repeating, Vice Chair Natoli.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Wynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess,
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Krieg,
Yes.
Commissioner Nakanishi,
Yes.
Commissioner Paroli. Repeating, Commissioner Paroli. I'll come back around. Commissioner Agar,
Aye.
Commissioner Slater,
Aye.
Commissioner Vogel,
Yes.
and Commissioner Bush left the meeting just before 5 o'clock, so he will not be considered for the vote. I'll come back around to Commissioner Paroli.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we have a vote of 11 yes with 1 absent since the roll call.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. So that item carries forward with 11 with one. You said one abstention. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Commissioner Bush left the meeting just before 5 o'clock, so he's not in.
Fair enough. So 11 yeses will carry the motion. So thank you for that. Thank you, Stacy, for your work on that item.
Great, thank you.
All right, good work. So item 12 is the report on the Delta National Heritage Area Management Plan and approval of the plan. I believe that's going to require a vote as well. And I believe, Blake, you're on with us, correct? You're going to give us an update and ask for a advisory committee charter?
Yes.
All right.
Good evening, Chair Villegas and members of the commission. As Chair Villegas mentioned, my name is Blake Roberts, and I am a senior environmental planner with the commission. Today, I will provide an update on the National Heritage Area, or NHA for short, and ask for commission action on a charter for the new NHA Advisory Committee. On March 12, 2019, the President signed the John Dingell Jr. Conservation Management and Recreation Act, which established the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta National Heritage Area and designated the commission as the local coordinating entity. The commission's first primary task is to prepare the National Heritage Area Management Plan for approval by the Secretary of the Interior. In the first half of 2020, the commission entered into contracts with Point Heritage Development Consulting to help develop the overall management plan, and with California State Parks to prepare the interpretive section of the management plan. The management plan will include a set of policies, strategies, and recommendations for funding, management, and development of the NHA, analysis and recommendations for coordinating federal, state, local, and tribal programs in the NHA, an inventory of resources that should be preserved, restored, managed, or maintained, an interpretive plan for heritage resources, and an implementation and funding program. National heritage areas are by their nature community partnerships and will rely heavily on local partners and public engagement. Based on guidance from our consulting team, Commission staff determined that the creation of an NHA Management Plan Advisory Committee would help ensure broader representation and provide public input for the management plan. Since the management plan is a formal document, it makes sense to formalize the advisory committee into a charter. The main features of the charter include the formation of a 15-member advisory committee that will provide recommendations about the development of the management plan to the commission, and a subcommittee of the commission focused on the NHA. The advisory committee will seek input from diverse stakeholders, including government at all levels, businesses, landowners, agricultural, community, cultural, natural resource, and recreation groups, and the general public. Much like the Delta Protection Advisory Committee, there will be an application process for the NHA Advisory Committee positions. The Commission will consider the mix of skills, experience, and perspectives when selecting committee members, and geographic, cultural, and multi-generational representation from across the Delta and Carquinez Strait. Meetings of the Advisory Committee will be roughly quarterly. The Commission will also form 4 NHA advisory task groups on resource stewardship, organization, heritage development and tourism, and interpretive planning. These task groups will be chaired by the members of the NHA Advisory Committee. The expected term of the NHA Advisory Committee will be through successful approval of the management plan by the Secretary of Interior, which is expected by June of 2023. Following Commission review of the charter, Commission staff will solicit applications for the new advisory committee from interested members of the public and work with members of the Commission's NHA subcommittee to suggest appointments at the Commission's next scheduled meeting in November. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate your consideration of the advisory committee charter.
Right, thank you, Blake. Thank you for that. All right, are there any comments or questions by any members of the commission regarding Blake's presentation and the request?
I'll move staff recommendation, Mr. Chair.
All right, so we have a motion to move your request. Is there a second to that motion?
Yes, I'll second that.
All right, so Skip, that's your motion, and the second was by who?
You don't know my voice. This is Diane.
Diane. Diane,
Who was that? Diane.
I'm told it's so distinctive, so I thought, you don't know?
Oh, Oscar.
I'm going to get myself in trouble. I'm just going to be quiet on that one. Thank you, Diane, for your second. All right. Is there anybody from the public asking to, raising their hand for asking for public comment?
I don't have any signal, no.
No, okay, very good. So, so I just had one, so it sounds like, Blake, is this something that we're doing that's unique to the NHA process, or is this required as part of our appropriate stewardship of the sort of the infancy of the NHA work we're doing?
This isn't unique, but it's not required. We actually use the charter for Mountains to Sound in Washington as sort of as a starting point for the charter that we developed here. So there are other NHAs that have similar advisory committees.
Fine, great, okay, very good. All right, sounds good. So we have a motion and a second, and so Madam Clerk, I'll need you to take a roll call vote on that one.
Chair Villegas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Natoli,
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yes.
Commissioner Burgess,
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Krieg,
Yes.
Commissioner Nakanishi,
Yes.
Commissioner Paroli. Repeating, Commissioner Paroli.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Slater,
Aye.
Commissioner Agar,
Aye.
Commissioner Vogel,
Aye.
And without Commissioner Bush present, it looks like we have a vote of 11 yes.
All right, very good. Well, that motion carries forward, so thank you all very much. The only other ask I would have, maybe Blake, is if you wouldn't mind, and maybe it doesn't have to be the next meeting, but maybe in short order here, is just maybe bring us back a one-pager on kind of what the expectations are of the advisory committee and what the charter looks like. For those new members that are coming on board, they get to see kind of a trajectory of kind of what the responsibilities will be, what the timeline looks like going forward. Because this is exciting. This is, I mean, we've worked very hard to get to this point, and so now we are actually going to start to put pen to paper for those that are going to be participating in the NHA work. And so this is where the real meat starts to get placed on the bone. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, sir. Thank you for your work. All right, let's see. That takes care of our formal agenda items 1 through 12. Item 13 is to adjourn, because otherwise our next meeting will be, believe it or not, in November, November 19th. So does anybody have any other comments or questions before we close the meeting?
Oscar, this is Commissioner Wynn.
Yes, sir.
Real quick, I just want to make a comment on Dennis. Dennis did an outstanding job when he was here in District 10 for Caltrans. And we're really glad to see him back, and certainly look forward to working with him as we did in the past. So Dennis, congratulations. And again, we're happy to see you back.
Thank you, Commissioner Wynn. I appreciate the comments.
Very good. All right, thank you, Chuck. Thank you for that. All right, everybody, thank you very much for sticking around this evening. And that brings our meeting to an adjournment. Thank you very much. We'll see you in November.
Good job, Oscar. See y'all.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.